Okay, well, of course. Oh yes, so just sort of the timings. We'll speak. Well, I'll speak, or we'll speak for probably until what's that? 3:30. We'll probably go to and have a bit of a break. Just a cup of tea, biscuits, the important stuff. and then yeah, we'll go then for another hour and a half. So would finish at 5:30. But if anyone needs to go before, because I know I said 5.
I will need to go before.
That's fine.
I need to go at 5.
Okay. Well, yeah, we'll just do whatever then. Maybe a shorter break or something. Okay, so yeah. Well, what's this about? Well, of course, there is no topic in this sense. So there is no thing called non-duality that's being discussed, of course. Because, of course, there is no such thing as non-duality. So the suggestion, one could say, of course, is just that this is it, so to speak. So an apparent meeting in HARTFIELD, travelling to HARTFIELD, sitting, listening, an apparent body sitting and listening is just all there is. So it's naturally whole and complete, one could say. It's just naturally perfect, so to speak, just as it is. And so, of course, there's no sort of where the meeting starts. So the small talk, so to speak, before the meeting is just what appears to be happening. And then Izzy starting to speak, and, you know, the so-called start of the meeting is just the same, just what appears to be happening. So, yeah, as I say, we're not discussing anything. Nothing is going to be recognised or realised, because it's just not possible already. So, of course, what seems to happen, one could say, as part of this, is that this seems to... there seems to be this apparent experience that this is happening to me, and that I'm sat here, this is my body, this is my life, I'm listening to Izzy, whatever. And of course, the suggestion, one could say, is that this just is a dream or an illusion, so to speak. There is no one. So there's nothing wrong with this, of course, an apparent body saying, I'm me, this is happening to me, this is my life. Of course, there's nothing wrong with anything, but the suggestion, the response, one could say, is that this just is not happening. There is no one. And so there's no one that can fall away, obviously, or recognise this, or die, or collapse, or explode into boundless energy. All there is already, one could say, is boundless energy. Already. Which is nothing magical or mystical. It's this. It's just what appears to be happening. Just apparent bodies sitting in HARTFIELD is boundless energy, boundless freedom, and boundless love. For no one. And so, of course, yeah, I mean, there's just nothing to say in that sense. So, I mean, there seem to be questions, and that's, of course, fine. And yeah, there is no right or wrong, of course, so everything is welcome. Or we can just sit in silence and wait until it's time for tea. But yeah, everything is welcome, as I say.
So when you say there's nothing, what does that mean? I mean, I guess it means there's nothing, but I don't know, it's a bit of a, I guess in the human realm it's just a bit of a mind screw really. How do you make sense of it? How do you comprehend it? How do you apply that to your daily life? I go to work, I do stuff that has, I guess, apparent meaning. The point of it? I just sit at home and just do nothing.
Oh, well, of course, the suggestion one could say is that there just is already no one. So there just is already no one who could or couldn't do this, who I mean, the so-called response, one can say, of the apparent person to this sort of communication seems to, like you say, be, well, what's the point? I'll just do nothing, or I might as well quit my job, or whatever. Which, of course, a lot of these so-called motivations of having a job, I mean, of course, this just seems to be a function, one could say, but of sort of having these big career prospects, let's say, or wanting to get things out of life, so to speak. This just can seem to totally collapse, of course, if it's seen, one could say, or obvious in that sense that there is no one. And so, yeah, of course, like you say, it just cannot be, it's totally incomprehensible. And there's just no one who could even try to comprehend it. I mean, this is nothing, so to speak. So an apparent body asking a question is nothing, being everything. And of course, these things like a job or bills or whatever just seem to be just what appears to be happening. So there's just no suggestion to do or not do anything, to give up the job, to live off the land or whatever. There's already no one who could decide to do this or not do this.
Interesting. And what's your experience of just like day-to-day life then, with this kind of way of being or not being, or apparent being? How does it work?
Oh, well, of course there is no experience.
Okay.
So this so-called, seen from the person, of course, this is death, one could say. So, seen from the person, this is the end of experience. But of course, in that apparent collapse, it's just obvious, one could say, that there never was actually an experience. And so, yeah, there's just no experience, no awareness. It's totally impossible.
Can we talk?
Oh, yeah. It's very, very informal. Don't need to raise that.
I don't want to interrupt the train of thought.
No, of course.
I've forgotten the question. Is this a concept? That's what I was going to say. Is this a concept or an experience for you?
Well,
for the know you.
Well, neither, of course, neither. So this is neither a concept that is being spoken about or a theory that one could read in a book or whatever, nor is it something one can experience in that sense. Well, in every sense. So there just is no experience. Experience is impossible. So in a sense, one could say this seems to be the sort of things one could say the person kind of dabbles in, let's say, knowledge or experience. So either there's sort of, this intellect, this theory, and then there's something called non-duality or Christianity or spirituality or whatever. Or there's maybe experiences, so experiences with oneness or experiences of happiness or love or whatever. But of course, this is neither. It's just what appears to be happening. And so these whole things of knowledge or experience just totally collapse.
But you're talking about it so conceptually, aren't you?
Oh, well, of course, words seem to be happening, but actually there's no talking about it, because there is no it that is being referred to. Just the suggestion, one could say, is that this, what appears to be happening, is all there is. And so there's no it that's being spoken about that isn't this, so to speak.
Yeah, I get it. Did you stumble across this, or did you wake up one morning and it was gone?
Well, it was totally random in this sense. I was just pottering around. I think I was watching Netflix or something. got up to go to the toilet, and this apparent death, just this total collapse, which obviously just no one wakes up from. So there's just total death in that sense, seen from the person.
Had you been following that? You know, like following Tony Parsons for a while?
Yeah.
So somebody told you that there was an excuse the words, you know,
Yeah.
but that there was such a thing.
Exactly, yeah. I'd come across, I mean, only within, there was an apparent awakening of whatever, when I was sort of doing all this monastery stuff, let's say. And that seemed to be this energetic shift, one could say, but I certainly survived that. So there was sort of nothing is everything, all these sort of insights, so to speak, and felt like I was dying, but still felt like I was just in the process of dying, or kind of a near-death experience, let's say, something like this. But then I survived this, and it happened to me. I mean, certainly the so-called person seems to be quite shaken by that, one could say. I mean, I was never the same again, let's say. And like we were saying with motivations for jobs and stuff, this sort of thing just totally collapsed. I mean, I didn't want to do anything. But yeah, and actually it was very soon after that I was introduced to Tony, and then just by the book, but it was mainly Andreas Müller, another sort of speaker, let's say, that I listened to.
From that stable, as it were.
Oh,
The Tony Parsons.
Oh, exactly, yeah, sorry,
isn't
Andreas, yeah, it speaks in the same way, one could say, as Tony, yeah. Yeah, and then, as I said, I mean, there was a love-hate relationship then with this type of communication. Because sometimes this is, you know, so clear and just, yeah, great and whatever. And other times it was just totally annoying and totally abhorrent. I couldn't even go near it because it was so frustrating. And then, yeah, just 9 months or so later, this just seemed to just totally collapse in that sense.
Love to be able to kind of apply this to our daily life. And I mean, it's not applying it, but I guess, is it a reality, this? Is it an experience? It's not experience, but can it be classed as a reality, or?
Well, no, I mean, no, this word reality I wouldn't describe as, yeah, there just is no reality. So this, just what appears to be happening, just sitting in a room in Hartfield or whatever, is not, I mean, it's neither real nor is it unreal. So it's just what appears to be happening, and totally indescribable. And so, of course, it doesn't matter what one refers to it as or describes it as. I mean, if you want to call it a reality, then whatever. But this reality word seems to sort of imply already that it's real, of course. Or that it is a reality, which is manifest or whatever, which it isn't. And so, yeah, of course, there's no application of it, because there's nothing outside of it. Because what appears to be happening is everything.
Did you perceive things through your human body, or do you see things from another angle, or as every people say it's non-dual?
Am I behind you right now?
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly what I'm asking. Are you everywhere? Are you omnipresent, or are you seeing things behind your eyes? Obviously, I'm used to non-duality, so I'm wondering how
Through
it works.
my third eye, yeah.
Exactly. Or whatever, the pineal gland, or whatever, how it works. So.
Well, no, of course not totally normal in this sense. So this body just seems to function totally normally. And so there just seems to be apparent seeing, apparent talking, apparent listening. There's just totally, yeah, as I say, totally normal. But of course, no one doing that. So there's no one looking, so to speak. There's no one behind the eyes, so to speak. Or anywhere else. There's no one outside of the body, of course.
How does it kind of work when you kind of like making decisions in life? So, for example, should I get a pizza tonight, or should I eat something healthy? Those boots, how did you choose those boots as opposed to buying some stiletto heels? Like,
Oh wow, I mean, stilettos aren't usually...
Yeah, exactly, or just, yeah.
Well, I mean, of course, decisions just seem to happen. There's just no one doing them. So, to drive here today, to speak, or whatever, it just seems to just happen. There's already no one choosing or not choosing to do this. So, should I have pizza or whatever? There's just these just very normal choices, of course. I mean, totally normal, totally mundane, one could say. Gorgeously mundane in that sense. And there's just no one doing them already.
Well, after this apparent death, has it made, in your body perception, has it made life more interesting or more dull? Apparently.
Oh well, neither. Of course, it was the end. It's the end of me, so to speak. It's the end of me's life. And so there's nothing. I mean, after. It sounds like there's a before, of course, but there was no
end, was there?
Exactly, yeah. So it's just totally normal, as before. Let's say there already is no one. I mean, in this sense, one could say a lot of these exciting hopes out of life, of course, have just collapsed. Because there's no one there anymore who's sort of projecting onto life that this is how things should be or this is what I want to do in the future.
Well, you don't become a complete bowl of tofu or something, do you? You know, you say,
well, I hope I'm not.
How beautiful is this? Oh, how lovely is this?
Oh, yeah, of course,
you know,
yeah.
So it's not that you're just blah.
Oh, and of course, I mean, appreciation, just whatever, totally normal. So,
In fact, greater appreciation.
One could say so, yeah. Because there's no longer this anxiety of me or my life or whatever. So just totally just just totally what appears to be happening. So a sunset is just a sunset. A flower is just a flower. This meeting is just this meeting, and there's nothing else.
Does it not open your heart more?
Oh.
Not your heart, but I have to use these words.
No, but I was saying as in, well, of course, the sort of romantic answer would be like, oh, yeah, it's so wonderful and overjoyous. But of course, this one that would find it overwhelming with love is dead. So there just is what is unconditional love, but there's no experience of that. And so it's totally normal in the sense of, obviously, sort of sunsets don't become more magical or anything like this because they're just the same as they always have been in that sense.
And were they magical before this happened to you?
Oh well, I mean, yeah, one could say so. Just a love of
magical.
Exactly, yeah, one could say so. I mean, in this sense, one could say there just seems to be just more of just a okayness with the little things. In this sense that, of course, the person is always wanting to get, as I say, get things out of life. But there's just sort of life is just what appears to be happening. So just cooking the dinner, going to the pub, having meetings. Yeah, as you say, watching the sunset, going to the beach. Very sort of beautifully normal things, one could say. Without this kind of me that's trying to, well, what about me? What could I do? I could start a business with this. How would I make money? Or should I have a partner?
No,
Whatever.
Yes, no.
Yeah.
But judgment seems to die as well.
Oh well, of course, there's no one
Or
to
it might
judge.
arise,
There's
but-
no one to judge. There's no one who could judge.
Yes.
There just
Yes,
is
so
no
it
one.
arises, but you don't pay attention.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't really seem to arise in that sense.
Mm.
Yeah.
In a way, that okayness might not be a bad thing. I mean, because I guess if you're seeking the sunset or sunrise and it's a rainy day like this, then you're waiting for it to come and you're not satisfied until it comes. Or so maybe you're in that sense. If you're always looking for that magical experience, you may not be satisfied with what's there in front of you, like just a normal standard day like this. So I can kind of see from that angle.
Oh well, exactly. I mean, one could say the apparent person. I mean, of course, there is no person that doesn't feel satisfied. The sense of being someone is the sense of unsatisfaction or dissatisfaction or whatever. And so, like you say, yeah, this so-called person always seems to be looking for something else. This apparent meeting, apparently sitting in a room, just seems to be missing something. There just seems to just be, this isn't it. maybe it's going to come this evening or whatever, or as you say, tomorrow I'll go and do this. And so, of course, this so-called seeking seems to then take many forms. Through whatever, drugs, sex, food, whatever. And then the more spiritual things like oneness, non-duality, God, whatever. Of course, though, this is it, and there is nothing to seek. No one who could seek. And also, there's nothing wrong with seeking.
Because seeking happens.
Exactly, yeah.
Doesn't it?
Apparently, yeah. Already for no one. And seeking is just the same as just apparently walking the dog.
Do you like practice anything, or like is there like any sort of, I don't know, do you do any meditation, or do you do any group stuff, or is it just like this is it and
Yeah, of course, no. There's just, of course, I used to do all this stuff, meditation, inquiry, whatever, and then this just totally collapsed. So, all these things, some people, so-called people, seem to just sometimes do these for relaxation, one could say, but for me it was always sort of to do with insight, trying to know something or get something, or try and have a sort of a moment or a collapse or a realisation that would just explode everything or whatever. Always looking for that key. Oh yeah, of course. This is it isn't, of course, even a mantra or a knowledge or anything. They're just totally... Well, it's not that there's nothing to cling to. There's no one who could cling or not cling.
that is fascinating.
Do you think that you have to have one's life more or less in some sort of order for the collapse to happen, so that you're not having to, I don't know, write the checkbook or get this or answer the phone or do that stuff? Do you simplify your life before that?
Well, of course not in this sense, because there just is nothing that could collapse. And so there just is no one already. So this sort of, I see what you're saying in the sense of sort of...
Unlikely to happen to you if you're being... Well, perhaps it could, because you just say,
yeah.
give up.
Yeah. Well, of course, there just already is no one. So in this sense, one could say totally random. Of course, there is no cause and effect in this sense. So this seems to be the sort of angle, one could say. The so-called person seems to come at this with any angle it can, and to see this as an approach would then sort of think, okay, well, maybe if I'm relaxed, or if I'm, as you say, if I'm more simple, or if maybe I'm more open, or if I listen more, or no, maybe if I have a goal, if I go and get a job or do some charity or whatever. All these things are hoping for something to happen, of course.
Yeah, but there's a person there, isn't there?
Exactly. Well, apparently. It already is this. So it's already the thought of, or the apparent wanting to make it simple, or the apparent wanting to have a goal. It's already just sort of appears to be happening. As a story, it seems, for me, it seemed to take me to get, as you say, absolutely just pissed off. Just totally fuck this. I just know, whatever. But of course, this, even in itself, the giving up and the wanting to, okay, I want to surrender, is of course still for the person an act of wanting and doing. And so then that seemed very painful, because there's just, for the person, it seems as if there's no escape. So I'll do, and then, I'm so sick of this, I'll just rest. But then, this even seems to be some agenda, one could say.
To me, this reminds me of when my instinct is running at its highest level, and instinctively I will feel that this might be a good place to go or do or whatever, or see somebody or not to see somebody. And my instincts, it drives me quite a lot now, day to day, about how I'm going to plan my day. And it almost feels like it's coming from somewhere else. And strange thing is, when my grandmother died, and I was 40 when she died, everything seemed to suddenly fit into place in my life, almost like she was guiding me it was the most weird sensation. I felt like she was the one that was finding me a place to park at the car park, or, you know, sorting out something that I hadn't even thought about doing it that way. And I was also trying to learn more about instinct and how to follow that, rather than doing the pros and cons and writing down what should I or shouldn't I. And that has guided me to, I even live here, that guided me to live here 16 years ago. My instinct told me to come here, which I've never regretted, and all sorts of amazing things have happened since I've been here.
Well, of course.
That kind of thing, is that kind of relating to what you're talking about? In a way?
Well, of course, in one sense, one could say what is being suggested is just energy, one could say. It's just, I mean, totally indescribable in this sense of instinct, one could say is totally indescribable. Words, really. But of course, what is just all that appears to be happening. And so one could say there can be a resonance with what is being suggested here. That just is, one could say, just, I mean, as I say, totally energetic. And this so-called sense of me can just seem to totally collapse. But of course, there is no higher guidance, of course. So there is no spirit or God or energy even. I mean, what appears to be happening, one could call energy. It just seems quite a natural word. But of course, there is no actual energy, like a life force or energy or whatever. So one could say just instinct or seeming instinct may just be what appears to be happening. But so maybe writing things down and trying to make a choice. And just both, in this sense, just don't happen to anyone. But in this sense of a resonance of just this, and totally intangible and indescribable, one could say so.
First thing that happened this morning was that story. It just came to mind, the story of the salt doll. You came from a Buddhist background, did you not?
Yeah, what the salt...
You know about the salt doll went down to the beach? Went down the beach?
No, I haven't heard.
And it went into the ocean. And that was the end of the salt doll.
Oh. Oh, I see, right. Oh, well, of course, one could say. And in this sense, though, of course, there's nothing to even dissolve. And there is no...
Well, it had gone. It went into the ocean. If we use that as an analogy.
Exactly, but in this analogy, so to speak, there just is already no salt that could or has to... I mean, this seems to be, a common one in Buddhism and things like this, like... you are the ocean and not the wave, or whatever, or all this sort of analogies. But of course there is neither. I mean, so there neither is a separate so-called individual, nor is there a universal oneness that you truly are.
No, but when that happened to you, it was like the dissolving in the ocean. There was not like exactly an ocean and you dissolving, but you were no more because...
just total collapse in that sense. Yeah. There's no salt left, and there never was.
No, there never was. No.
Exactly. Yeah.
Have you seen any differences in yourself before the collapse and after? I mean, your like human emotions or like things like that. I don't know, where you think, feel, react to things.
Well, I mean, the funny thing is, of course, one could say that nothing happens. So this apparent death is, of course, only an apparent death. So it doesn't actually happen. So in this sense, as I say, I mean, really the surprise, one could say, is that just nothing happens. I mean, the expectation was always that something was going to happen. And like you say, there'd then be a clear before and after. But of course, this so-called setup of before and after just seems to be the type of duality the person seems to live in. One could say as a story that the body seems to have, I mean, one could say becoming less neurotic. All these sort of neuroses that are seem to be built up around the person. I mean, one could say it's still just programmed into the body. So the body just seems to function in exactly the same way, of course, as it always has. But a lot of these so-called stresses that it seems to have had before with whatever relationships or whatever just seem to slowly be relaxing, one could say.
How do you define that apparent death then, at that particular point? How can you say there was an apparent death as opposed to it never happened, sort of thing?
Well, exactly. I mean, of course, totally impossible to speak about because, yeah, exactly, it didn't happen. Nothing happened. There was no death. But, of course, then seen from the person, the apparent person, this would be seen as total death because nothing survives, of course. But in that apparent death, it's just clear that there is no death. So then this whole thing of death just loses its, I mean, yeah. So, yeah, as you say, totally impossible to describe or... And nothing happening just cannot be conceived of for the so-called person. Because it seems to think at first that I am happening. And so then obviously projects this onto everything else. That this meeting is happening, that this body is happening, that this life is happening, whatever. And just it's totally inconceivable that nothing is happening. And of course no one then dies and then is able to conceive that. It just is totally inconceivable, and the one who would want to try to or think it could conceive of it is no longer living, let's say, or trying to conceive.
It's all pretty pointless talking about it.
Oh, of course, yeah.
But I can see, I mean, I could say the same experience of nobody, but your interpretation, or the interpretation that is coming out of your mouth, from your mind, is different from the interpretation that would come out of my mouth, from my mind trying to make sense of it, you know what I mean? So the words that you use, or when you say there's nothing and there's no universal one, I would say from out of my mouth that there is only one universal isness, and then the mind is trying to interpret and trying to be of service to that which it sees and can't understand, and yet it comes out as this is what's happened or it hasn't happened, and there seems to be a death or a turning point or a sudden awakening or whatever other people have a way of describing it. So I just hear a different way of saying something that is universal.
Yeah, I mean...
How would you... Because what is it that's speaking?
Oh,
I know
well,
it's the
of
dream.
course,
There is nobody there.
Well, exactly, yeah. There is no one.
But there is an interpretation which is different from other people's interpretations.
Well, of course not. There is no interpretation. So this whole layer, one could say, of... I mean, the person, one could say, seems to get into this game, one could say, with awareness. Or with the sort of the universal isness. Which of course then seems to sort of recognise, one could say, that all there is awareness, or all there is isness, or whatever. And then there's an illusory me that appears, or whatever. But of course, this awareness, this universal isness, or whatever, is the same so-called illusion of someone. The same so-called sense of location, or interpretation, or reference, or just having an angle or a step to understand this by, or not understand this by. Which of course there's just nothing wrong with. There just seems to be a body just speaking about awareness or whatever it is. But of course, this whole, awareness itself of course is impossible. And so there is no one talking, but there's also no one in that sense, of course. This phrase, no one, just seems to come, one could say, as a response to something saying, I'm someone. And then something just seems to say, well, there is no one. But of course there is no actual no one, or no nothing, or universal nothing, from which everything is coming.
And there I would use the word, if there's formlessness, so it's not nothing, but formless aliveness.
Of course, the words in this sense just totally don't matter. What is being suggested, one can say, is that all there is this, which is just whatever word can be used to describe just an apparent meeting in Hartfield. So there just is nothing under this, or behind this, or producing this. So there is no formlessness somewhere else that is then bringing this into form, or whatever, or that this is formlessness, or whatever. As I say, the words just don't matter. This just is all there is, which sort of appears to be happening.
It sounds like as human beings we try to use language to define things, but it sounds like we can't define whatever.
Exactly.
About
What appears to be happening is totally indescribable. And of course it's just, there is no experience of it or awareness of it. So of course what is cannot be described, and of course doesn't need to be described. Sitting in a room in Hartfield, apparently sitting in a room, is just whole and complete. And it's not happening to or for or by anyone. And of course it doesn't need to be defined or known, and it cannot be known. The only thing that would seem to want to project that onto this is this so-called person. And so what is, sitting in a room in Hartfield, is just totally, one could say blindly and innocently itself, and perfectly itself.
Where does love come into it?
Well, what is unconditional love. So
And saying it doesn't make it so, though. How do you...
Well, of course, nothing makes it so. Because it isn't so. So it isn't actually unconditional love, because obviously nothing is actually happening. So it's just what appears. This, an apparent meeting, is unconditional love, what appears to be happening. It's just whole and complete.
Why do we say unconditional? I agree that it is, because more love seems to happen. But where does it come in from this concept?
Of course, it just can't even. There just is nothing that anything could get into as another concept, and then love. One could say this would assume that sort of there's this or whatever, and then there's love or unconditional love, and how do the two sort of marry up? How do they fit in with one another? But of course, what is unconditional love, and so it's everything. What appears to be happening.
Even what's happening in Sudan.
Absolutely, of course. Even total apparent horrors and horrific events and suffering and pain is just totally unconditional love. Because, of course, the so-called person would seem to interpret unconditional love as, let's say, an exclusive positive. Certainly I always found love to be this sort of good thing or this good feeling or whatever. This just seems to be what the person seems to associate with love. But of course, unconditional love is neither good nor bad. It's just everything, just what appears to be happening. So it's the happiness, the love, the sort of romantic love, the joy, and then it's also, the terrible pain and the deep suffering.
And the horror.
Of course, yeah. Unconditional love, one could say, is, as I say, it's not in this so-called dual thing with the person of it's good or it's bad. And the horrors in Sudan are awful. I mean, yeah, of course, apparently.
So is love an actual thing, or is it just an illusion? Like us human beings are illusions. Like, is it nothing?
Well, yeah, of course. Unconditional love, one can say, is nothing being everything. And it's just this, just what appears to be happening. It's just whole and complete. And there are, of course, actually no illusions. So one could say the apparent illusion is the illusion to be someone. But of course, even this is not an actual illusion. There isn't one.
We get really complicated when we get into cities and things, and I think sometimes when I think about, particularly in India, because I come up in that sort of stream, people living in the villages there, they're living that. They don't have a concept. They're too busy, you know, eating the rice, babies being born, this happening, that happening. They're not questioning anything. And
Yeah,
so
exactly.
they're living it quite automatically.
Yeah, I mean,
And
exactly.
we're going back to that state, really. That's where we have to be, I think. Only not us, but, you know, this just happening right now.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, one could say it's already automatic in that sense. And of course, even the apparent body stressing or questioning or whatever in the cities is also automatic.
Yeah.
But one could say it just seems, you know, when there's perhaps a slower pace of life or whatever, it seems that one may observe that or whatever. It seems a bit more hectic in the cities. But of course it's equally as automatic. There's equally as no one doing either. But yeah, of course, I mean, one could say with this so-called, I mean, whatever, since this so-called collapse, the body just seems to just totally just whatever, do what it wants. And this just seems to be very basic. Just cooking, cleaning, chatting with friends, socialising, whatever. I mean, as I said at the start, these goals out of life, the rushing around to get something, of course, is just what appears to be happening, but yeah, this seems to just totally collapsed, of course.
And that's like the end of guilt or
Oh, of course,
or any of that stuff, you know.
Yeah, okay.
Because it couldn't have been any other way.
Exactly, of course. I mean, guilt and of course anything can arise and already does.
Anything can arise, but you know, that's
Exactly.
a lovely way out. It didn't happen anyway.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, this thing with guilt. I mean, of course, there's just no one to feel guilty. And there's no one to... I mean, this thing with guilt definitely seems to be personal in this sense. If I feel guilty because I've done something to them, usually, or haven't done something, or whatever. And then usually with these ideals, one's ideals out of what one should be doing, perhaps, or whatever.
Now, those have gone.
Yeah.
It's just like that was meant to happen. And I believe in the good anyway, in the love. And I think that what appeared to Annabelle to be bad was actually probably good. You know, I don't know, but there's no judgment about whether it was good or whether it was bad. It was how it was and how it was meant to be.
Exactly. I mean, in this sense, of course, what appears to be happening is just everything. So the good, bad and the ugly. So there, of course, is also no sort of secretly written fate that sort of everything is meant to be this way, or sort of, you know, I don't know, someone gets hurt or whatever, or an illness. Oh, it's okay, you know, this is good, this is my path, this is meant to be like this. So of course there's nothing behind this or deeper than this that is writing the script or whatever. And there's just what appears to be happening, which of course the person can seem very cruel. You know, some illness or something like this. Well, there must be a reason. This seems to sort of pin on this idea of there must just be something. Why? And if there's not a why, then at least this must be happening, or it must be sort of written in the stars, or it's all good or whatever. But of course, it's just what appears to be happening, and it's just neither inherently good or bad.
Yes, that must be written quite Pollyanna. I was thinking it's all bound to be good in the end.
Well, yeah, of course, you know, this sort of it will all work out in the end, but of course there is no end. So
yeah, but it does, you know, because the
Well,
picture
what-
changes. all
one
the
could
time.
say, in this sense, everything is okay. In this
Yeah,
sense,
everything
everything
seems
is
to
just
be.
perfect as it is. Yeah, including the apparent bad stuff. It's just perfect, unconditional love, just whole and complete. Yeah. In this sense, of course, nothing could be any other way. I see what you're saying. In this sense, of this is just it. So, yeah. Yeah, everything's just naturally okay, just as it is. If we could, yeah, in a nutshell. It's an easy way to say
No
it.
one can hold on to that in
Oh,
bad
well,
times.
of course. Oh, well, exactly. I mean, yeah, exactly. And the person, one could say, seems to be this experience, let's say, of just chasing the good. Or wanting good to last forever, or avoiding the pain, or whatever. Because there seems to be this fear, one could say, that one couldn't deal with the pain, or that it would overwhelm me, or whatever, or it would just be too much, or too intense, or it would kill me even, or whatever.
But it doesn't, yeah.
But of course, there already is no one to... I mean, the person just seems to be this loop, one could say, of seeking and longing for something, but at the same time avoiding the pain or whatever.
I do find it difficult, though, that you say nothing is happening, but everything is unconditional love.
Yeah, exactly.
Because those seem like contradictions.
Yeah, I mean, well, nothing is happening is unconditional love.
How is it?
Oh, well, of course...
See, the two things don't seem the same to me.
Well, of course, there is no how, yeah. And there is no why. And yeah, of course, they're just, I mean, this unconditional love, they just, I mean, it isn't even a thing, of course. So it just can't, like everything, it just can't be explained or described. And of course, it doesn't need to be.
Then why are we using the word?
Well,
If it isn't,
it
then
just
it can't
seems to be what's happening. Just this, what appears to be happening seems to just be...
And does love
Unconditional
arise
love.
in that experience of what's happening?
Oh, well, I mean, of course, in this sense of romantic love or whatever.
No, I don't mean
maybe
romantic
just
love,
maybe-
like, you know, welling up of, oh, it's great. You know, just
Oh yeah, of course, but one could say the anger and the frustration is equally unconditional love, as the welling up and the sort of more perhaps obvious expression of love or joy or happiness or whatever. You know, emotions at greeting a child after a long time is equally as unconditional love as getting angry or into an argument with someone, or having road rage or whatever.
And the other thing that's happened is that things that might at one time have made me cross, or made, crossness would arise, excuse the terminology, crossness would arise, now it seems humorous. Now it seems funny, in other people and in myself,
Yeah, I mean, one could say they're obviously these things, one could say, don't seem to linger in that sense so much. I mean, this sort of rumination over, oh, why did they do this to me, or they've done that. I mean, this person that does that just isn't there. So yeah, there's nothing to stick to, of course. So just happiness seems to arise, and then sadness may arise. I mean, just full on intensity, full on life. So just full on pain and crying, and then maybe the next minute just full on laughter, whatever. These things just don't seem to stick, of course. Yeah, I mean, of course, when pain arises, it's not very funny, of course. It doesn't seem funny.
No, but it's like the sting's been taken out of it.
Oh, one could say so in a sense, but actually, in other ways, one could also say that it's full-on stinging, because there's also there's not this artificial sense of there being the plaster, which seems to be the person. So actually, I would say more that the sting is full-on and not even trying to be taken out. And so the pain is full-on pain, without this story.
Yes,
whatever.
but you're not adding another thing to it.
Oh, one could say so in that sense, but actually in a way...
The pain is just the pain.
Exactly.
Yeah, so you're not saying, oh, it's the pain, and oh, how awful.
Exactly, poor me, why me,
exactly.
Which in a sense, actually, although one could say, of course, seems like this additional layer, seems to be a way to manage the pain. Even though one could say, oh, it seems to add to the pain or the suffering, the rumination. But actually, in a sense, making up this story about it, one could say seems to be a sort of escape the person tries to use from actually the intensity of the pain, or what appears to be happening. So even if it's, oh, this is fine, I can sort this out, or if it's, oh, poor me, it seems to still be in some way, a rejection, one could say, of what appears to be happening. Because this pain is just full-on intensity. Already, of course, for no one. The illusion is that there even is this thing.
Ramesh Balsekar, I don't know if you've heard of him, but Indian.
I heard, I think,
yeah, because
not much.
He's a non-dual. I'm sorry about the terminology, but non-dual sage. People come to him to listen to him. He was also the president of the Bank of India, so he had two, completely different sides to him. But when somebody said to him, "Did you cry when your son died?" His son was an alcoholic, and he said, "Of course, I'm a father."
Exactly.
But they sort of expected him not to have any feeling.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. I mean, one could say so. Of course, there is no one, and the person, one could say, seems to then think, oh, it's like a robot or whatever. So, of course, in one sense, in this sense of there not being anyone, one could call it a robot. But in that sense, it's a totally human, emotional robot, one could say. So, yeah, of course, totally normal, and as you say, full-on feelings.
Yes.
Full-on grief for someone dying or pain or whatever. Yeah, just what appears to be happening. Yeah, exactly. There's there's no one. This seems to paint this picture, one could say, in the conception, because that's all the person can do, of sort of this, as I say, no one speaking, sort of, not speaking, not walking, just going to the fridge, taking something, just almost this absence of life is what the person seems to imagine. Which, of course, there is no life, but in a funny way, of course, this then is full-on life as well.
Yeah, I just think it's a terminology, like no one's opening the fridge, no one's pouring the milk. Whereas, my terminology is the milk's happening and the coffee's happening.
Exactly, it's the same thing.
You know.
It's already just what's apparently happening.
I didn't say that there's a no one, I don't know.
Of course, there isn't a no one. It's already no one, yeah. So it's just what appears to be happening. Opening the fridge, getting the milk, having a cup of tea already happens for no one.
Mm.
Yeah, and no one doesn't become another new reference point.
Mm.
Of course not. No.
And my terminology would be the dream. It's dreaming. It's a dream.
Is what?
That it's dreaming. That
That
there
it's
is
a
a dream.
dreaming.
This, in fact, this sitting here is the
It's
dream.
a dream.
In the isness of.
Mm.
So I would say the love is that isness, that is holding whatever is happening as the dream, because when we sleep and we have a dream, we actually allow the dream to happen in a way without allowing.
And when
So that's how I would, my mind would understand it like that, as the dream is happening here,
yes.
as if we're all people.
Yeah, I mean, well, of course, nothing is happening. So not even a dream in this. I mean, this would already assume that there is something behind this, or bigger than this.
I know there is. It is. Reality sees non-reality. Otherwise, this wouldn't be dreaming. So, my mind and my experience couldn't say that this speaking or this non-reality could ever be seen if there isn't a reality that sees it.
Oh, well, of course this isn't seen. So there's just no possibility.
This
To me,
words
it's
get in
seen.
the
To
way.
me, it's absolutely seen.
But there's no one to see it.
There's nobody to see it. There is reality. Seeing non-reality, seeing dream.
I mean, of course, this one could say is just a complete story in this sense. There just is no deeper
story.
reality behind this, or creating this as a non-reality. I mean, what appears to be happening is neither a reality or a non-reality. It's just what appears to be happening. So it's just whole and complete as it is. But there just seems to be, as I said earlier, this thing with awareness or whatever that seems to, one could say, get quite close, let's say, as a story to this type of communication, but seems to still identify with this being something, or about something, or part of something, so to speak. That maybe this is a non-reality and it's part of a bigger reality, or something. Some nothing or unknown or whatever. And as I say, the sort of language seems to get quite close, one could say. But in the end, so to speak, this whole setup also seems to collapse. Because, of course, to already have this sense, one could say, of there being something else, there seems to initially be this sense of me, or this sense of this being something, or there being a location here. Or in the body, or as I say, out of the body, or universal, or whatever.
How come things appear to be if there's no one to perceive it? So surely if there was nothingness and death, it would just be blank, and we wouldn't be able to see a painting there or anything. But how can things be apparent if there's nobody perceive it? If there's nobody perceive it happening, so how can we apparently be sitting here? How can we apparently have a conversation if there's no consciousness or awareness to perceive it? If it was the flip side and there was absolutely nothingness, then we wouldn't be able to even hold a conversation right now, surely.
Oh, well, I mean, the body just seems to function, one could say, normally in this sense. So having a conversation just seems to happen. I mean, one could say, as the so-called person always seems to think of this in terms of a why and a how. So this seems to be a mystery, one could say, to the person. So, I mean, how could it possibly happen if I wasn't there doing it? Or if there wasn't something behind this? As some person, or maybe not a person, but some awareness or consciousness. There must be something. Otherwise, how could this happen? But of course, the suggestion is that this is not happening.
Well, like a dream is not happening.
Oh,
Really,
well, I
from
mean,
another view differently, it's not happening actually. You didn't
well,
drown.
of course, a dreams at night are just what appears to be happening. And just like this is what appears to be happening.
So when you wake up, when
Well, when the body
When the
wakes up,
picture
the
changes.
body gets out of bed, and then the body might say, "Oh, I had a funny dream last night," or whatever.
I was in Africa.
Exactly. But there's just, I mean, so of course the body seems to just totally normal in this sense, function in waking or whatever, and then go to bed and have a dream at night or whatever. But of course there's no one doing either or no one in either. But of course this, what appears to be happening, or one could say the dream seems to just be this apparent imagination or whatever.
Well, it's relatively real, let's say. I'm talking about normally, not in this context of that we're talking about now, but one would say that the dream was relatively real. Yes, you did go to Africa, but not really.
Oh, well, of course, then in this sense, this apparent meeting is neither.
Yeah, but not really.
Well, it's just not happening. So it's not real, but it's not unreal. Whereas,
It's
of course, with the
relatively
dream,
real.
you might just say it's just whatever, it's just a dream, it's just an imagination or whatever.
Like when you wake up, or as you have had an experience of being woke, when you had an experience of being awake, you can say, "Oh, that was a dream. I dreamed
Oh, yeah,
of it."
totally, of course, yeah. Might dream that I went to Africa or whatever, and then...
No, you might have dreamed, like when you leave here, say, "I dreamed I went to HARTFIELD and talked."
Oh, well, no, of course, there just is no one who could do that, even. I mean, this just isn't even happening, so... This
You might talk
but this
about
isn't
it.
a dream. Oh, of course, yeah, the body I might go home later and just be like, "Oh, yeah, I had a lovely meeting at HARTFIELD." Of course, totally normal, but one wouldn't describe this as a dream. It's just not a dream, nor is it real. Which, of course, is totally incomprehensible, because for the person, it has to be one or the other. So this dream...
No, analogous, I meant, to a dream.
Yeah. Oh,
Like
well,
it didn't really happen.
Well, of course, nothing really happened, so one could say so, yeah. But of course, I wouldn't describe this as a dream in that sense. There's just no one dreaming or nothing that could dream, and it's not being dreamt.
Or being observed by anything.
Exactly, it's not being observed by anything, no. And I mean, one could... Of course, it's just totally impossible to describe this. So one can't even say, "Oh, yes, it's like a night dream." Because this isn't like anything. Because it's not even happening. It just can't be compared to anything. Night dreaming is what seems to happen, and just as this, or what appears to be happening in the day, is just what appears to happen. And so I can't say, "Oh yes, it's just like a dream at night when you go to sleep in it," because it's not like anything. There's no reference point.
So this, and I'm sorry to call it a concept, but this understanding, whatever you want to call it, is neither higher nor lower than
Exactly. Anything.
the top Buddhist understanding or any other understanding.
Oh, well, I mean, what appears to be happening, in the end, one could say this apparent death seems to be the total collapse of an understanding, or apparent understanding. To be obvious or revealed or whatever, that there just never was any understanding. Because there is no one who could understand or know or describe what appears to be happening, or life or whatever. And so, I mean, yeah, as you say, all these these steps of enlightenment and sort of the people at the top in Buddhism or Christian mysticism or whatever it is, or higher states of realisation, of course, too, are just what appear to be happening. But there is absolutely nothing higher about them, or lower, than the everyday Joe Bloggs going to the shop to get a pint of milk. Which, of course, can be very shattering for the so-called spiritual person. That seems, one could say, to place a lot of these things on a pedestal, one could say, sort of higher states of consciousness or whatever. And there's nothing wrong with them, of course, but they're just what appears to be happening. There's nothing in them. They're not going anywhere.
No, but they're pleasurable.
Oh, well, maybe. But for no one, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, of course, this then seems to be another game, though. This sort of, it might be seeking money for the whatever everyday Joe, and then for the spiritual person, maybe seeking states of consciousness or seeking states of bliss, or there's something in Buddhism, I can't remember the name of it now. Jhanas or things like this, types of awareness or consciousness. Yeah, it's just the same game as wanting more money. The same setup.
So my kind of understanding of this philosophy was, I guess, attaining a higher level of consciousness will just make you understand the truth. So from what you're saying, it's what is seeking that sort of path, I guess.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, there is no truth. No, I mean, this seems to be the so-called experience of the person, one could say, is that whatever path it seems to take, as I say, it could be with money or with jobs or whatever. Or it could be with insight or consciousness. And then at the end there is some reward. That's what seems to be hoped for. That something will come good in the end. And of course there then seems to be an unsettlement with this, so to speak. As this is not enough, I must get to the end or whatever. And really, one could say what the person seems to be seeking in that is its own death. It seems to constantly be longing for its own absence, which it projects onto this so-called end. But of course, this is an absence that is already the case. A death that is already the case. It's already this.
I would have thought kind of getting to that high level of consciousness would actually get you to that point where you can see that and be aware of it.
Well, yeah, I mean, this would be another hope one could say of the person. That it could see this or be aware of this. But of course, this is impossible. And there is no one who could be aware of this. I mean, of course, hearing things like unconditional love, the biggest hope would be that I can have that. Or I can be aware of this. So what is being suggested is a total lose-lose situation. Either I feel like me, and I'm here, and I'm not there yet, and this is not enough. Or there seems to be this apparent death, and there is unconditional love, which is what is, but of course there's no one who experiences that. Or is aware of or knows it. So yeah, it's totally lose-lose. Yeah, well, yeah. Maybe if it's not obvious in this sense, what is being suggested here is not a popular message for the person, it seems. Because this doesn't offer anyone anything. The person is always seeming to, I've come here today and I'm hoping to get something. I'm hoping Izzy can tell me something about my path or how to expand my consciousness or whatever, or if I can realise something. But of course, I mean, there is nothing, so it's total death for the person.
When you went to the, I've forgotten the story, but you got up and then you weren't there.
Yeah.
Then, post that.
No, well.
Well, you know, I know. Subsequently, I don't know. Has anything changed?
Well, the funny thing is, one can say, of course not, no. I mean, in this apparent...
at one level it hasn't, but for an onlooker.
Well,
if
I mean,
ask your parents.
Okay, well, they may just seem to say I seem to have become more relaxed, one could say. But of course not in this sense suddenly. The body just seems to be slowly becoming less neurotic, cleansed, one could say, of its traumas in this sense. Which is funny, really, actually, because obviously the so-called, well, for me as well, a lot of the time I was trying to heal, or whatever, trying to become whole, or on this path of healing, or self-improvement, or self-love, or whatever. And actually, the funny thing is, one could say since this apparent death, I mean, I don't really want to use the word true, but the sort of the true healing in that sense seems to have, well...
Because you're letting go of all the traumas.
Well, of course.
The traumas.
The traumas seem to
coming
just
out
be
of the
letting
body.
themselves... Exactly. Yeah. So one could say the healing then, really then just seems the body can just relax. Because there's no longer this illusion of being someone.
So the
Death
traumas-
goes out the window.
Death, oh yeah, exactly, yeah, of course. There is no death.
So your traumas are letting go then?
The baby and the
What?
the baby and the bathwater.
Sorry.
Sorry, yeah. Are your traumas just letting go of themselves now then?
Oh, well, as I say, the body just, one could say, just seems to be relaxing, and just slowly, one could say. I mean, certain things, certain ideas and concepts may just have just suddenly collapsed or whatever.
Right.
But of course, in terms of these ingrained habits of the body, one could say, they just certain... I mean, of course, there's no one to experience this. So, of course, there's just no one that can sit here and say, oh, yeah, this is happening, this, because, of course, there's just no one experiencing this. And it doesn't matter either. A highly neurotic, tense body just is no different than a more relaxed body, a more relaxed, easygoing body or whatever. There's both no one doing either. Yeah, it might be less of a pain for my parents now. Put it that way.
It apparently feels, or appears, that there's a much deeper acceptance of everything that there is in this moment, and that there aren't any stories with anything anymore,
Yeah, exactly.
and so everything it appears simpler and clearer and more straightforward.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, of course. Yeah, what is naturally simple, one could say.
Yes.
And naturally easy, let's say. I mean, of course, this ease isn't experienced, and difficulty may arise, but in that it's just naturally whole and complete, just what it is. Nothing could be added or taken away. So yeah, this whole story of how this shouldn't be like this or whatever, it may just totally collapse.
So if you surrender to that, you don't create trauma.
Well, one could say that there is
But it
no,
doesn't
if there's
stick.
no longer anyone sort of trying to fix or change, or this is not
Or
okay.
that might happen.
Oh, it might still happen, of course, by no one, but this seems to totally collapse. And then one can say this seems to be where the traumas may build up, or the habits, you know, trying to fix things, organise things,
Yeah.
control. Things have to be like this, plan.
That's right. So
And then,
that's all gone.
Oh, of course, yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Mm.
I mean, of course, planning may still arise, but it just seems to be a
No
natural
trauma.
function.
Yes.
You know, well, this meeting is today, the time we're going to have a break and whatever. But this sort of added element of having to be somewhere, of course, seems to be this creation of time, or
And
this
if you-
sense of
'cause you
time.
haven't done something.
Oh yeah, I mean, of
until
course,
that time.
totally, yeah, totally not. There's no one who could or couldn't. Yeah.
So apart from human fear, like not crossing the road in front of a car, there's no fear.
Oh well, yeah. In terms of this sense of this individual having this deep existential fear. No, of course not. There is no one. But of course, fear may arise in terms of just normal anxieties. So I don't know, going to meet a friend that you haven't seen in a long time. There might be some sort of anxieties around that. As I say, just habits of the body. But these just seem to be relaxing. Just body just seems to be becoming more easygoing. But yeah, this deep-rooted fear. No, I mean, no, of course, there's no one to be afraid. And nothing to be afraid of.
So would you call this the final understanding, or do you not know that it might suddenly all just pop like a balloon?
Oh, well, of course, this popping like a balloon is what apparently happened. So this is not being suggested as an understanding or anything, of course.
Okay.
This final pop, so to speak, is what is being suggested. This final death, in that sense. Yeah, there's just obviously is no further.
how do you
Well,
know
of,
that?
well, of course. No. Well, there just is no one. So, I mean, this apparent collapse is just the total obviousness that there just was nothing that could collapse. So nothing even did collapse, and the opportunity or the possibility of something collapsing in the first place is just totally totally collapsed, to use that word.
So would death be the right word then to use? Because it sounds like it just never was there, sort of thing. So.
Oh, well, exactly. I mean, yeah, you could call it anything. There is no death, so. Of course, death for the so-called person always seems to be projected into the future. Usually when the body dies or whatever. And it's always sometime in the future. But of course, the body will one day run out or whatever, and there'll just be this, the body will no longer seem to apparently function. But of course, that can't even be said to be an end, because it never actually began actually functioning in the first place. So yeah, you can call it death, you can call it whatever, collapse or whatever. I mean, nothing happens, so. Okay, well, it's probably a good time for half an hour break.
From what?
Oh, exactly.
From this apparent meeting.
From me drilling you all. Okay, well, yeah, of course this is still it, so yeah, there's nothing to be added, of course, in this sense. Just what appears to be happening is naturally whole and complete, of course, and no realization or recognition or understanding or insight or whatever could make this more whole and complete. And so, yeah, of course, there is no message, there is no teaching, there is no advice or prescription, there's not even nothing to do. There, of course, is no one who could or couldn't do anything, or not do anything. So there's just what appears to be happening, a body just walking around, or maybe coming to a meeting, asking a question, or just listening, or whatever. It's just naturally whole and complete, and already not being done by anyone. So yeah, we've got an hour and a bit more, whatever, and yeah, anyone's welcome to.
But we all carry on
say anything.
as is what Douglas Harding calls the as-if world, which is quite nice.
Oh, well, one could say the body already just apparently functions on its own. And there just I mean, of course, one can't even say the body functions as if it is someone. I mean, one could, as a story, say that the body seems to talk and say, I'm me, or this is my life, or seems to talk about what it wants from my life. But of course, this doesn't confirm that there is an actual me in there, of course, because there isn't one. There just seems to be just a body saying, there's me, and then just like there's a body apparently sat here saying, there's no me. They're both just what appears to be happening, and neither is saying anything different in that sense.
So no spiritual connotation to it.
Oh yeah, of course not. No, I mean there just is no such thing as spirituality in this, or it's a story in this sense. It's just another sort of, just apparent topic or concept, one could say, which there's just nothing right or wrong with. But it's no different from, just the football or whatever, or talking about a film you watched or something like this. There's nothing higher about it, let's say, or distant or further or magical or mystical. And so because this so-called message or whatever seems to talk about energy, one could say, or that this is all there is, it seems to get boxed up with spirituality or whatever. But actually what's being suggested is, of course, there's nothing special or spiritual about it.
What do you mean by spiritual? I mean the word spiritual. Because isn't everything?
Yes, it is, but I don't mean like in the context of spirituality in the most encompassing form of all religions and all understanding and religions and non-religions and concepts. I think that's what I mean by that.
And what would you mean by spiritual?
Oh well, of course, there is no such thing. So,
As what?
as spiritual or spirituality.
What does spiritual or spirituality mean now?
Oh well, it seems to be referred to as perhaps something mystical or out there or beyond the words or energetic or something else, something that can't quite be. Whatever. But of course, there is no actual thing called spirituality. There is nothing else.
Because I would say this is spiritual. Everything. There is nothing that isn't this spiritual.
Yeah,
And that's the word.
I mean,
meaning
exactly,
a different
yeah.
thing.
In this sense, this
Yeah.
word spiritual is just another word. So, I just don't tend to use this word, let's say, because of course it seems to have a lot of connotations, that it is itself something else. So if one wants to call sitting in a room in Hartfield spirituality or whatever, of course, the words don't matter, but it's just what appears to be happening. And
It's usually used in terms of being the opposite of material, isn't
exactly,
it?
yeah,
It's usually used in that way.
exactly.
That's why I wanted to make sure that we were talking about the same thing.
Oh well, exactly, and really,
And
we're not. There's no.
nothing. But
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
if spirituality is everything, there is nothing else.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, yeah. If one wants to use that word, yeah, this is all that appears to be happening. But I mean, I usually, as I say, don't use this word because there's nothing material or spiritual about what appears to be happening. So it's just neither, in that sense. I mean, in using these words, one could say that the sort of material would perhaps lean on like the real side, and the spirituality would lean on perhaps the unreal.
Yeah.
But of course, this is what is neither real nor unreal.
Which could be called God if you wanted to.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. What appears to be happening, one could say is God. Yeah. Yeah, of course. But this word is, probably the most loaded of them all.
Don't go there.
Exactly. Yeah. We say that one quietly.
Well, it's totally mysterious. Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah, exactly. This sort of God seems to conjure up all sorts of images or whatever. Rights and wrongs, man in the sky, something else, even a force or whatever. But of course, this is God, one could say. And yeah, it's just totally inexperienced.
Because Kenneth would describe it as stunning.
Oh, well, one could say the ordinariness is stunning, one could say. But of course, I don't tend to
You don't
sort of
use that
use
word,
these
yeah,
words
no.
because for me, these sort of descriptions even sort of indicate, for me would be this is stunning, or someone finds this like amazingly stunning or whatever, or beautiful. I mean, yeah, so there's sort of no one in awe of the stunningness. One could call it stunning, but there's no one that finds it stunning. So, yeah.
And it's simple.
Oh, totally, yeah. One could say the stunningness or whatever is the simplicity.
Yeah.
There's nothing that's sort of out of this world that is stunning, and it's stunning because it's so overwhelmingly wow. The simplicity is the beauty, one could say.
I don't know. I can look at those clouds and the trees and avenues, and just something wells up that is just incredible, and it's love, and it's joy, and it's peace, and it's all good things, you know. And I can't say it's nothing. It's just nothing. I can't say that. It's everything. It's just amazing. It's God, if you like, you know. And
Well, yeah, it's both, of course. It's nothing being everything. The everything is nothing, in that sense.
And it doesn't need a sunny day.
Oh yeah, I mean, of course, sunny days are good, but
yeah, but the wind and the waves and the
yeah, exactly.
the rain lashing, and it's also does the same thing. It blows my mind, actually.
The nice sunny day is just equally as what appears to be happening as a crap, miserable British
rain.
rain.
Take the joy out of it by saying nothing's happening.
I think that time nothing, it just almost negates it, doesn't it? So it's just language, isn't it? Just to define it. So just replace that with another word, I guess.
I like the word nothing because you can
There's
say
no
no thing.
thing.
There's no thing that's better than anything else. That attracts me.
I mean,
So it can be a sunny day. It can be that's a thing. It can be a wet day. That's a thing. It's no thing. It's everything.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. I mean, nothing is unconditional.
Formless.
Formless. Yeah.
Yeah. It all appears in formless. In the formless, because you can't catch anything.
I think there are fruits to this understanding then. You know, don't you find that there's, maybe not, but when that understanding happened, did love become more intense, and that there was no judgment of anything, and that there was a surrender and an acceptance of what is, and whatever happens.
Oh,
That's the
well,
fruit of it.
of
That's
course.
the
Less
fruit of it.
anxiety, maybe. Less anxiety, like you
No
said.
anxiety. Yes.
I mean, well, of course, what is just can't be accepted or not accepted. This one could say would already create this distance, so to speak, this artificial distance. And so one could say what is apparently happening is just naturally accepted, one could say, or naturally whole and complete already. And so there's just already there's just this distance is impossible for one to even have a chance, let's say, to accept it or not accept it. It's already just what appears to be happening.
So what you can talk about there is the fruits of that.
One could. I mean, of course, it's not a benefit then.
But one's pleasant, and one's unpleasant.
Oh well,
you
of course,
don't choose to
of
put
course
your hand in
not.
the fire.
Well, I mean, this apparent death, of course. It's not replaced by anything, of course. So it's not replaced by this so-called me, maybe unpleasant or restless or agitated or whatever. And then there's an expectation, perhaps, that then this apparent death those bad things will go and be replaced by perhaps a pleasant or
No,
whatever.
I don't mean that, because the bad things can happen, but there's an acceptance of that also. And a surrender to that, because you can't do anything about it anyway. What's happening is happening.
Well, of course, there is no one who could or couldn't do or accept or whatever. I mean, it's just what appears to be happening, with no extra layer of, can I accept this or can I not accept
Not
this?
I accept it, but acceptance is happening.
Well, I probably wouldn't use this word because in this sense, this sort of implies one could say that there is what is happening and then there is the acceptance of what is happening, even if it's not personal. But of course, there's just nothing or no one that could or couldn't accept or not accept. Even if it's not a person, it's a thing. It's just already what is. It doesn't need to be accepted. It can't be accepted. It's just totally impossible.
But it is accepted, otherwise you come out into a very dual aspect, unless acceptance happens.
Oh, well, one could just say it just is what it is. It doesn't, as I said, it doesn't need to be accepted to be what it is. It's just already whole and complete. It doesn't need anything or anyone to sort of to say it can be what it is or to accept it. It's just already whole and complete. Yeah. Doesn't need that sort of extra validation or whatever. Or confirmation. I mean, it doesn't, it's not even happening, so, yeah.
I'm talking to this guy this weekend because I came across a book recently. I'm not a religious person, but I was just attracted by the title. It's called The Fifth Gospel of Thomas. I don't know whether you've ever heard of it.
I've heard of the Gospel of
I came across the guy who wrote it. It's only just been published quite recently, and he's done a lot of research on it. Why I'm quite attracted to God because he comes from the same place as my mother comes from, in the west of Ireland. That's the same background, so there's a connection there. But I'm going to speak to him tomorrow night, and the whole book is about the sayings of Jesus in relation to how they're non-dual. It's just sayings, it's not discourse, it's not stories, it's just what he said. It's just a collection of what he said. There's like 100 sayings and they're all non-dual. So I'm quite interested in how somebody, because they found this gospel somewhere in the Middle East in 1945 in a jar that they dug up, and just wondered how somebody sort of like 2,000 years ago spoke in a way that was non-dual, and I'm just curious about whether non-duality is something that is becoming more apparent recently, or whether it's always been there. And then the Christian religion took it over and created maybe a Jesus cult, rather than what he was saying was something totally different.
Yeah, one could say so as a story. One could say so as a story, yeah. The original gospel or whatever, it seems to be this type of communication, let's say.
Yeah.
And then seems to, as you say, go off and be created deities and rules and restrictions and whatever, paths, processes. But of course, there is nothing that is not non-dual, if we're going to sort of use that. I mean, so the apparent small talk down the pub is equally as non-dual as a so-called gospel being discovered in the earth and Jesus' original sayings or whatever. So there's nothing sort of special or different about them. That this is non-dual and that there's then I mean, of course, there's just no difference between the casual chat at the pub and Jesus' so-called sayings.
I better not say that to him.
No, I think that probably won't, that probably won't go down too well.
I went to a meeting yesterday, she told me it's just the same as going down the pub. Spent 30
maybe,
years writing it.
I would rather hear Jesus' sayings than what is said in the pub.
I'd probably be at the pub, I think.
What?
I said I'd probably be at the pub.
I find drunkenness boring.
Sitting next to Jesus.
Well, we could have a we could have a blend of both. There we go.
But that's totally it, isn't it?
What?
That is it. It's so old that it's because it's the only thing.
Yeah.
So Christianity found it, or it's even older. You find it in Vasishtas. How do you say it? In the old Indian writings, you know, Shankaracharya translated stuff, and it's absolute non-duality, as you would say what non-duality is, but
And in the Upanishads.
and it's as
and all
old
of
as
this.
and the Upanishads.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Vashistas,
of course.
that's the
I mean,
Vashistas,
yeah, if you
yeah.
take all of these sort of so-called
Everyone's
scriptures
correct,
back,
right?
they, one could say have this kind of communication, of course.
But historically, you can I can understand why maybe religion was set up, because
Yeah.
life was sort of rather precarious centuries ago, but maybe there's more ability to be able to talk about this stuff these days. You know, you can be...
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah,
Crucified.
Zoom or
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it seems a lot of things aren't allowed to be talked about these days.
So, yeah. I like the idea of Jesus being down the pub. I like that.
That's the idea of it being.
It's very homely, doesn't it?
What is that man's book called?
The Gospel of
St. Thomas.
the fifth Gospel of St. Thomas, and then the subtitle is Non-Duality.
Okay.
I've got the Gospel of St. Thomas, yeah.
But he's
It's a little tiny book, the Gospel of St. Thomas, and it is all non-dual, but not that.
No,
bad.
but this
Not this man's translation. This was the actual from the Hamadis, from
Yeah.
the jar it was in,
Yeah.
the translation of that.
I think this is the first book that's been written totally about that the non-duality of the sayings. I think so. It's quite a tome.
Oh, this is quite a little book, the Gospel of St. Thomas, and it's all non-dual.
No, but this bloke describes how it's non-dual. You see
Oh,
what
I
I
see.
mean?
Yeah, because like the saying that he said, I am the path, the truth and the life, or the truth,
way.
the life, and the way, not the path. The way, the truth and the life. And I thought, gosh, that's totally non-dual. The way being null. So I'm sure we could sort of hunt around in his words and find non-duality in everything, maybe.
Well, Christianity came after he
Yeah.
didn't it? It was
After
nothing.
him.
He wasn't a
Exactly.
Christian. Jesus, was he? That was all
Exactly.
invented after him. He
Like all
probably
religions,
thought-
they
he'd
come
probably
out
think
of-
it was hysterical.
Same as Buddhism.
Exactly, it always comes after the
Comes
event.
after
And
the
it's like they
event.
miss the point.
Yeah.
It's
I
narrowing
wonder what will
down.
come after you.
Izzy Cloke.
More visits to the pub.
I dread to think, Brendan. I dread to think. Oh, dear.
life based around doing these talks then, or like is there anything else that happens there?
Oh, well, I mean, of course there is no one that has a life.
Okay, of course.
And so there's just what appears to be happening. So of course there's no one in control of that. So there's no one planning one's life or whatever. There's just what appears to be happening. So the talks just seem to be set up or not, or just, I mean, yeah, walking the dog. Of course there's no one with these, well, there is no one. So there's no one with these sort of, yeah, grand aspirations out of life.
So you wouldn't like promote your talks or anything like that, or like?
Oh, well, this seems to happen, yeah, of course. Yeah, but of course there's this whole sort of sense of this being me doing that, or that this is going to be, you know, I need to get people to come because I have something really important to say. I mean, of course not, no.
Then what would kind of drive like?
Oh, well, of course none.
Nothing.
No, there's just no one there. There's no one driving any motive. There's no motivation, of course. There is no one.
There's motivation to set up the talks.
Well, one could say in the sense of the body just seems to just log on and set up the talks, but this sort of sense of pulling oneself together and being motivated and really feeling, you know, that one's going to get something out of these talks, of course not, no.
But there's a way of feeling a bit impelled to do that.
Oh, one could say, and so there's just maybe just, you know, enjoy having these talks or whatever, just friends with, you know, conversation with friends. But this sense of motivation, I mean, obviously totally collapses because there's nothing to be motivated by. I mean, there's obviously nothing to get, or no one who could get this.
But the talks don't just happen of their own accord.
Oh, well, of course, yeah, of course. They just seem to happen just all by themselves. Yeah, I mean, everything just happens of its own accord. Seems to happen of its own accord.
I've come back to that. Do you think that your Buddhist experiences took you to this or played a part in that?
Oh, I mean, one, as a story, one could say, in this sense of discovering a word of non-duality or whatever. And yeah, I mean, reading these books or whatever. I mean, this so-called awakening seemed to happen actually at a monastery. But actually,
did
when
you live in the monastery?
No, I mean, I stayed for some time, but actually it was just whilst I was visiting my brother when he was at one. So in that sense, there wasn't a stay there for me. But well, of course, I was going to say it's a coincidence, but of course there is no. In that sense, it would be a coincidence.
Coincidence.
Well, I mean, in this sense, of course, there's no. I was at the Buddhist monastery, and that's why this happened. As I say, I mean, this energetic explosion, so to speak, that never actually happens, could just equally happen in Tesco or whatever. But of course, there seems to be. I mean, I was reading a book about Ramana and dreams and all of this with this apparent awakening, and so this seemed to sort of. One could say there was sort of this inquiry going on and whatever, and then this whole thing seemed to collapse, but obviously kind of pieces still remained because I survived that. So as a story, one could say so, yeah, but then, as I say, really, no, because nothing leads to this. Yeah, it just could be, totally random in this sense. So, I mean... Of course, they're just maybe a body that has never heard of the word non-duality, or that it is even a so-called topic or apparent topic that could even be discussed or whatever, which of course it isn't. But someone may have not even heard of this as a word, and this just may just totally collapse. The sense of me just may totally just die.
Why do you think that that this was the path that you took instead of the pub? You know,
Oh,
hanging
well,
out.
that seems to be the path now, I think. Well, I mean, of course, there is no why. So there already was no one doing that, of course. And so the body just seemed to enjoy going to Buddhist things or non-duality, and then just since this total collapse, it just obviously doesn't seem to do that anymore. Because there always, of course, seemed to be a reason behind that, a sort of inner peace or inner satisfaction, or just, I mean, often the so-called person obviously can't even know what it thinks it's seeking for. Just seems to be this sense that something's missing. And so, of course, it may make up a whole story about what it thinks it's looking for, like enlightenment or whatever, permanent happiness or peace or something beyond all things or whatever.
Beyond the stress and trauma.
Exactly. But of course, I mean, yeah, it will articulate this sense of seeking in all different ways. Someone else might just say they just want to be happy or just want to find a lover or whatever. But yeah, this just seems to be energetic in this sense. This energetic sense, this restlessness, that this isn't it. And so that just seems to be out of which all this story seems to come, of what is being sought. And then just this hope, as I say, this seeming hope that one day that will be filled. And obviously a lot of the time this isn't even a conscious process that seems to go on. You know, these so-called bodies don't seem to walk around like something is missing and one day it's going to be filled. No, there just seems to be this energetic restlessness that most so-called bodies wouldn't even sort of talk about or notice in this sense. But there then seems to be bodies that seem to inquire more in this way and notice this. There's this restlessness. Why is that? What is that? How can I? And then directly address this so-called thing. And of course, even this apparent restlessness is wholeness. There is nothing missing.
Whereas if you were destined, if destiny was to take you to be a botanist, you would notice the flowers more than pick up that book or go to the monastery.
Exactly. Well, of course, but there is no destiny, of course, yeah. But in this sense, Izzy could have, been a botanist or a gardener or an athlete or whatever, a cook, and this exactly, and this energetic explosion may have just also just collapsed apparently.
Do you think that this is where science has caught up with mysticism?
Well, of course, there are neither in this sense, but
Because they think there's nothing there.
I mean, so this sort of quantum physics and all this tends to now sort of speak about nothing, or all these sort of things about, it's been proven there's no free will, all of this. But, of course, this is just another story, of course. So nothing can even be proved. This can't, and this apparent discoveries, of course, don't even then prove that what Izzy is saying is, that's what Izzy's saying as well. Because actually they're just, Izzy isn't saying anything. He's just speaking. Which you could say, the science seems to show, one could say, is of course nothing, But nothing is not sort of this mysterious subatomic particle or something out in the universe, some black hole or whatever. It's just this, just what appears to be happening. And apparent progressions in science and biology and whatever are also just what appear to be happening.
It seems that science can't go any further than it has.
Well, nothing can go any further. Nothing can go any deeper or further. There is no nothing else. Nothing else that could be or to be discovered. Yeah, of course, there may be apparent discoveries about whatever, the body, the so-called world, the trees, nature, whatever. But of course, in terms of actually something happening or moving towards a point of something going to be ultimately discovered or a final truth, there isn't one.
Till Elon Musk that.
Oh, well, yeah.
Actually, when I listen to him, he seems to be just driven the way, whatever way he's driven, like the tide. I've got a lot of time for him, actually, you know.
I mean, yeah, exactly. There is no Elon Musk, of course. So in this sense,
but
all
an
the
entity
bodies
that
just seem to
we've
be.
agreed to talk about, call Elon Musk, because otherwise we can't talk about it.
Yeah, I know, but I mean in the sense of there is just already no. I mean, the body just already seems to just be just doing what it's doing and driven by the tide, to use that expression. Already, yeah. But of course, there is no one who can go with the flow or whatever. There's just, yeah. But yeah, things like AI, all of these sort of big concepts at the moment are, of course, just that, just concepts. There's no real threat, and there is no one to be threatened by that, or who could be. I mean, of course, it may be whatever, you know. Oh, that's not great. It's, you know, it'd be better if that wasn't like this, or whatever. Totally normal conversation, but in the sense of this actually being a real thing, of course. No, it's not.
If someone was seeking to have this experience, you know, of falling away, has anybody written, or are there any prescriptions for it?
Well, for this apparent death? Oh, of course not, no.
So Tony Parsons' books, useless?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, of course, yeah.
Useless?
Yeah, totally, totally. Yeah, like everything else, totally useless.
Or Jeff Foster?
Oh, I mean everything. There's no use in anything.
Who's Tony Parsons? Is he some non-duality dude?
He is, and has written quite a lot of books about it, and is considered to be someone who's well versed in it. Actually, he does write really well.
He sounds a lot like Izzy.
Yes, very much. Well, he is kind of from the
Yeah.
same stable, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
The same sort of...
All in the stable.
I don't know what I
Jesus.
If you're very...
That's it.
Oh yeah, well of course, yeah. There is no one, and then yeah, this communication seems to come out there. One could say, yeah. There is no Tony, obviously.
So, I mean, so there's no... You can't put anybody on the path to achieving it, or suggestions, or anything. It's entirely up to... Words get in the way, doesn't it?
That's why we're quiet.
But it is very different from like Marsakar, Ramesh.
Well, no, he says exactly the same things, but in different words.
He says that there's an incarnation of something that wants to form and then and leaving again. So it is
No,
like
he doesn't say that, does he?
Yes, I've got a very strong recording of it.
Really?
Yeah.
Ah, no, I don't...
It's very different, but it's the same. It's a different story with the same outcome. I don't know how you would say it. The same message that there is nobody, but there seems to be somebody entering the world and then after many lifetimes reach a point that it leaves. I'm not saying I agree with him or
I've
disagree.
never heard him say anything like that.
I'll send you the recording.
Do.
Who are you talking about?
Ramesh Balsekar.
Ah,
The guy that Annabelle mentioned that was a bank manager.
Oh, head
or
of the
something.
bank.
Head of the bank.
bank as well.
Before, in his previous, before he awoke or something.
Oh, I thought he was doing it at the same time. I thought that was
I
even
don't
better.
think so.
That's what I thought.
I don't think so.
Oh, that would be really
Incredible.
cool.
Yeah, we need some bankers like that.
Oh yeah, of course, one could say that seems to be, I mean, of course, with non-duality, like everything, it seems to become another religion almost in this sense. There seem to be so many different ideas,
Yeah.
obviously, and there, of course, there is no such thing even as non-duality to have an idea of. But one could say in terms of this communication, there seemed to be, as I said earlier, a message that one could say sounds fairly similar off the bat, like there is no one, and then there seems to be this illusion of someone. And then, of course, then there's this one message or whatever seems to then say, and I can show you how to see that there's no one, or whatever. And that there is just this, or awareness, or whatever, and that there is an illusion of someone that's not real, and that is not who you truly are, and I can help you remember, or teach from this place, or whatever. Which, of course, one could say is sort of, can get, as I say, muddied with this type of communication. That's not that
they
there's
don't
anything
teach
wrong.
though, they just are there and just have a discussion like we do.
Oh, yeah, I mean, of course, there's nothing, I mean,
It's not
there's
actually
no
teaching.
right or wrong in this sense, of course. But what this would seem to also then say is, of course, that there is also not this illusion even in the first place. So there's not even, I mean, this illusion is, of course, only an apparent illusion, that a body just seems to apparently say, I am someone. But, of course, there is then no actual illusion that could even collapse or be seen through.
Seems to me like the more the ego gets thinned out, it disappears.
And, of
It's
course,
a matter of egocentricity, really. You've got, when it collapses, the ego collapses.
well, of course, what's being suggested, I mean, the term ego could be interchanged with the me or the person or whatever.
The individuality.
Exactly. And what's being suggested is there just isn't one in the first place. So there is no ego that could even collapse in the first place.
What, the individuality collapses?
Well, apparently, of course. But on the apparent collapse, it's just revealed, one could say, that there just never was an individual or an ego or a person, whatever.
Yes.
Yeah, that could even collapse. It's just impossible. Yeah. So yeah, it can seem like this path of thinning out or fading or whatever, but of course in the end, this sudden death, so to speak, it's just obvious there never was this fading out, because there never has been anyone. Which is the surprise, one could say. I mean, in this sense, there's always felt to be a path by the person. And then it's just, oh, there never was anyone. There never was a path. Which, of course, is the total antithesis to what the person was expecting in this sense. For it to be some final revelation or final recognition or insight.
Like the apple falling off the
Exactly, yeah. This was always expected for the person. For there to be some, like a penny will finally drop or whatever. But yeah, of course not. But yeah, if everyone's, I mean, we were going to finish at 5 anyway,
Yes.
so I think it'd be a good time to wrap up. Well, yeah, I mean,
Thank you, Izzy.
well, this is it, so there is nothing to get, of course. This is wholeness. Yeah, the final truth revealed. Stay for a few more minutes. No, but thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah.